So of course I only have 15 minutes today. Each and every single one of these slides could be 15 minutes in and of themselves. So in the event you have any questions or anything, Claroty is going to be hosting the reception after the event. So more than happy to field any questions there, or also to point you to any direct resources or anything as far as cybersecurity for the OT environment. Okay, so today we're at the epicenter of a perfect storm. There's three major components that have caused this. So the main thing is the long life cycle of industrial control systems has caused a lot of exposure. So generally, a lot of these assets are 20, 25 to 30 years old. We're also seeing an increased demand for connectivity within the OT environment. So a lot of companies want to be able to make business and process decisions based on telemetry data that they pull out of their control systems environment. And the third thing is that the high criticality of these networks has caused an extremely valuable target for adversaries. So it's also a blind spot for a lot of security teams. So that, along with the strategic importance, has made it a very pertinent issue. All right, so it's important to note that nothing can be done without budget. So you need buy-in from your corporate board, absolutely. What we've seen is that the issue of awareness has largely been solved. So in 90% of the customers that we go into, it's already a boardroom issue. People are already talking about this issue. Of the Fortune 500 and very large corporations, we're seeing that the vast majority of them already have an OT security initiative in place, or they already have projects in place or products in place. So for most, it's a top 5 priority, and it's definitely a big topic of conversation. So chances are, if you're here at this talk, you probably have at least some kind of interest in OT security. If you don't have any sort of initiatives in place, it's probably a good idea to ask your security team why, and see if you can't work toward getting something in place. Oh. One point there is a good place to start would be to start with a OT security risk assessment. So you want to figure out exactly what assets you have within your environment, figure out what vulnerabilities and gaps might exist, and from there you can work toward patching and increasing your security within your environment. Okay, so just what makes IT networks so different than OT networks? There's a couple of factors that go into this. The main thing, again, is that they're legacy systems, so it's assets that are 20, 25 to 30 years old. Imagine if every single asset within your environment ran on Windows XP and Microsoft stopped supporting it 5 years ago. Imagine if there was no allowance for downtime within your environment. You can't deploy any sort of endpoint security measures because that voids the warranty from the manufacturer. So if you look at these issues, and also the fact that you can't use traditional IT security tools within the OT environment because they all run on their own proprietary protocols, it's easy to see why OT security is decades behind IT security. All right, so I'm going to talk about 3 different use cases that we've seen out in the field with Claroty. The first one's going to be a large global oil and gas company. So at any rate, this particular company, they noticed that a partner had gained access into their environment. The only way they knew this was that the partner had actually called them, and they mentioned that they were in the environment and that their volume data didn't match the pricing that our customer was charging. So basically what happened is our customer was able to patch all of these vulnerabilities. They were able to put in a secure remote access solution, and they were then able to increase layers of security within their environment and patch any of those issues. So you probably don't think of custody transfer as being a big cybersecurity issue. However, in oil and gas, you're going to release your product in a metered way, and ultimately, if they can see the assets within that environment, they're able to manipulate the data within those PLCs and able to change it for their own financial benefit. All right, so this next one is a large multinational electric utility. So through mergers and acquisitions and a large geographical spread, they had a ton of different assets on their hands. So they had multiple different PLCs and SCADA equipment ranging every single vendor you could think of. So that's a big problem we see, is that every company has a ton of different assets. We see a big challenge in that you don't necessarily know who's knowledgeable about the environment within SCADA. So those are the major challenges, I think. This particular company, they wanted to tighten up their security posture. So what they did is they ultimately needed to decide whether the operations team would run this initiative or whether it would go out of the IT corporate security team. So ultimately, they chose that the OT team would lead this initiative based on their unique understanding of the OT environment and those unique requirements. So at the end of the day, they implemented an anomaly detection tool. They were able to see exactly what sort of anomalies were in their environment. And they also had increased asset visibility and increased uptime within their operations. All right, so this next one is a large global mining company. How many in the room, just by show of hands, have heard of NotPetya? Anyone? So NotPetya is a malware. So ultimately, this customer that we had experienced NotPetya, and it shut down their operations. So we've seen a number of customers that have experienced malware that's completely crippled their operations. Of those that have been publicly released, we've heard figures in the 300 million to 1 billion mark in total losses over the course of time and legal ramifications and that sort of thing. So at any rate, the big lesson, I think, of NotPetya is you don't necessarily have to be a target to be a victim. So there's a lot of crossover between OT and IT, and as such, if you're impacted on the IT side, it can impact the OT side. So that was the major lesson there. Oop. All right, so just in summary, you don't have to be a target to be a victim. Again, OT and IT, we see a ton of crossover, and your systems that are affected on the OT side or on the IT side can cross over. The other thing is, take steps now with your people, processes, and technologies you currently have to put protective measures in place and figure out exactly what gaps you might have and where to patch them. The other thing is low-hanging fruit. So make sure your company and your organization does their part for cybersecurity. It should be an initiative that the entire company takes part in, from the boardroom all the way to the operations team. And the other last thing I'd say is do that basic network hygiene. So do a security risk assessment, figure out exactly what assets you have, figure out where those security gaps exist, and work from there to formulate a plan. Lastly, I'll be at the reception again, so feel free to come track me down or bring me a beer or whatever, and hope to see you guys there.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much. Como nos dijo Charles, lo podemos encontrar en los 2 coffee breaks que vamos a tener. Pronto habrá uno, habrá un siguiente y al final tenemos un cóctel de cierre. Bien. Thank you very much. Choose one, please.
Yes. Okay, so I'm answering one of these questions, I take it? Okay, so the biggest challenge to implement cyber OT, it's ultimately, I think, really learning who's going to take the initiative. So it's really finding that expertise within your environment. You need to figure out who has the background ultimately in OT that can converge IT. We keep hearing in the OT security world about convergence of IT and OT, and it's really unique. A lot of IT security people, they want to lock down the environment, whereas OT, the name of the game is availability and uptime within your operations. So I think that's the biggest thing. Find the right people for the job, put a plan in place, and go from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Un aplauso, por favor. Gracias, Charles.